This is the story of a crime so malicious, it's difficult to understand how anyone could even think of it. It begins, innocently enough, with a flight attendant, Jess, meeting the Australian actor Lincoln Lewis on a plane. It was 14 years ago, but unknown to both of them at the time, this harmless encounter would set off a catastrophic chain of events. Somehow, someone with a particularly warped mind got wind of the meeting, and then using social media, assumed Lincoln Lewis's identity. For the next decade, Jess and other helpless victims were stalked and harassed by what police now describe as Australia's worst ever case of catfishing. A holiday video from a happier time. Jess's life used to be joyous and carefree. For the single mum and jet-setting flight attendant, every day was an adventure.
It was, fabulous. Couldn't beat it. Didn't feel like a job, it was a lifestyle.
Mixing with celebrities, posting photos, all that was part of the job description?
It was just a way of life. It was really exciting.
But not anymore. The job she loved, flying the world and mixing with the rich and famous, ended up landing her in harm's way. Tonight, she wants to share a story so extraordinary, many won't believe it. How an evil predator deceived this smart and outgoing young woman and lured her into a world of outrageous lies.
People will never understand and they'll always think, how could you be so stupid? But until you're in it, you won't understand how difficult it is to get out of it.
In this decade-long drama, Jess's only fault was to follow her heart. It started so innocently. Another ordinary day at work when the Australian actor Lincoln Lewis boarded Jess's plane. So tell me about meeting Lincoln Lewis. What happened?
He was squashed in a middle seat and I was like, we can't have that. Not the son of, the great king. And just from the get-go, I was very confident back then and always jokey and a bit flirty, but in a jokey way. And we just hit it off and got talking.
That they hit it off is obvious from the happy snap Jess and Lincoln took. But neither knew it would set in motion a terrible series of events. So this is the photo that started it all, you think?
Yeah, that's the one.
As anyone would, Jess posted the photo on social media. She also found her new friend on Facebook and they happily messaged each other. But unknowingly, Jess had made an enormous mistake. She'd actually connected with a fake Lincoln Lewis account. In what way did that photo set off this avalanche?
We were joking about the pic and, do you remember that day, when we first met on the aircraft?
So you're being pumped for information and you didn't even know it?
This person had a very cunning way of extracting information.
For the next few years, they were great online mates. But then in 2013, Lincoln suddenly wanted to be more than just friends. Jess was pleasantly surprised by the celebrity's attention.
I still remember the actual day that it all changed. I recall him saying, "Can I call you?" And I was like, oh my God, okay. He wants to call me. And I thought, wow, okay, why not? So I gave him my number.
How were you convinced to become involved in this relationship?
My daughter was young and my focus was on her and my flying, which I loved. So, when a nice young man starts paying you compliments and seems to know a lot about you, it's very flattering.
Theirs was a long-distance relationship, conducted entirely online. Their busy schedules never managing to coincide. Telephone calls and text messages were the way they communicated. But despite never meeting, the romance heated up.
Good night, my beautiful boy.
It may be hard to believe now Jess could be tricked, But the catfish, posing as Lincoln Lewis, was always one step ahead. What about the fact that this was all online, like that you had not yet met?
Yes, so he had excuses for everything. I'd started to have a few little doubts. The fact that he wouldn't meet me and stuff, I'd started to have niggling doubts, but I thought, why would anyone contact me and, want to lie to me? It got to the point where I was starting to get really frustrated, and I said, come on now, this has gone on long enough. Stop messing me about.
By this stage, Jess was smitten, which made it easier for her to accept the excuses of her supposed boyfriend. And besides, he was always sending photos showing what he said he was doing.
I would be talking to him and I'd be saying, what are you doing? He's like, I'm having lunch with my sister, and then he'd send a photo of him with his sister having lunch. Again, red flag.
Trawling through the photos now makes Jess want to kick herself. But back then, it was so different.
My daughter was saying that she wanted a Bubble O Bill ice cream. Literally, 10 minutes later, this photo comes in and he goes, look what I've got. And I was like, I'd been having doubts, and then I see this come in and I'm like,
well, how could you not believe it?
Thank gosh those doubts weren't true.
But as time went on and there was still no meeting, Jess sought reassurance she wasn't being played. Did you ask for any proof that you were talking to Lincoln Lewis?
I'd said to him, send me something to prove who you are. And then next minute, I get a driver's licence sent to me. Lincoln Lewis's driver's licence with his address.
Jess was still in doubt, so the catfisher came up with a new extraordinary tactic, this time suggesting a face-to-face Skype call. So you spoke to him in person?
Yes, I did. The phone rang, and sure enough, here is Lincoln Lewis talking to me. And I just remember seeing him talking. I would say something and there'd be a bit of a delay, and then a few minutes later you would see him like kind of laughing and throwing his head back, and it didn't, I was giddy, I was excited. I was like, my God, this is actually him talking to me.
How could that happen? How could you have a conversation with him in person over Skype?
There is software that people can use to do this, and this person was just so good at what they did, so prepared, had obviously chosen Lincoln because there's plenty of, stuff on the internet, plenty of video footage. Somehow they'd used video footage and some sort of software that can imitate the mouth to speak as they speak.
The blurry video made the betrayal complete, but keeping up the elaborate hoax was a full-time job. As devious as the catfisher was, it was inevitable there'd be a slip-up. It happened when the real Lincoln turned up in Queensland.
This friend contacted me and said, hey, Lincoln's on my flight. I said, pardon? I said, no, I'm just talking to him. He's in Sydney. She goes, no, I just flew him into Brisbane. He's here for the Origin. Finally, the catfisher was caught out.
But when Jess made contact, the fiction continued.
He's like, okay, you got me. I didn't want to tell you. He said, because, I've got all this media lined up, so I didn't want to get your hopes up.
Wow, that was fast.
Very fast. There was no hesitation. I've never known someone who can lie so brilliantly.
Did you believe him?
The time that they were in the air, where he wouldn't have been able to have contacted me, was the time that I'd been talking to him all morning. And I then confronted him and I said, you need to tell me who you are.
Jess had been strung along for months, but now faced with an obvious untruth, she found a way to get an urgent message to the real Lincoln Lewis. He knew nothing about it. He was a victim too. It was horrifying and heartbreaking news.
He said, Jess, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that this is happening to you, but it's not me. He said, it's never been me.
Jess now knew everything she'd been told was a lie. Unwittingly, she'd trusted and confided in a twisted and cruel stranger.
It's not a person. It's a disgusting, subhuman creature. No one that's human could do that to another person, could be so vindictive and so evil and It's disgusting.
So you now call this person it.
It.
But the most shocking revelation was still to come when police got involved in the case.
And they said, okay, we're going to get you to close your eyes and listen and tell us if this is the person that you've been speaking to. So I said, okay, closed my eyes. They pressed play. As soon as I heard the voice, I got goosebumps and said, that's it, that's him. And they said, okay, now open your eyes. And I opened and I felt sick.
It's a no-brainer for Jess. If she could have the last 10 years of her life over, she'd gladly do it. The single mum and flight attendant thought she was happily involved in an online romance with the actor Lincoln Lewis. But in reality, she'd been deceived by a total stranger. When Jess discovered the truth and tried to end the fake relationship, things only got worse. Much worse.
I changed my number and I was like, it's over. And I breathed such a sigh of relief. I thought, that's it, I'm done. I don't have to ever talk to this creep ever again. So within 10 minutes of me changing my number, this person had tried calling and realised that I'd disconnected my phone and was straight into Optus trying to get my new number.
Somehow, the catfishers succeeded and, armed with Jess's new telephone number, started stalking her. It was a terrifying time. Jess moved house twice and changed her daughter's school. But the calls and threats kept coming day and night.
Why do you think I'm stalking you? I don't care. I know everything about you anyway. I don't need to stalk you.
Everything Jess did to try to end the torment seemed to fail. The anger in the catfisher's voice was as real as Jess's panic and suffering.
I remember one night I was in a fetal position on my bed. I'd had 50, 60 messages in a row with threats about my daughter. And I just couldn't cope anymore and I broke down, and I remember my little girl standing at the doorway of my room and she was only 6. She was hungry and she was saying, "Mummy, I'm hungry." And I was just rocking on my bed and I couldn't, my phone just kept ringing and I just had the pillow over my head. It was like, just make it stop.
19 phone calls. Do you think that I'm that sad to call you?
At the point of breaking, Jess went to police and offered to collect evidence for them, secretly recording more of her calls with the catfisher.
Calling fake Lincoln 542.
Hello.
Hey.
Then, in a very brave move to catch the catfisher, she spun her own lie to the person who'd been so cruelly pursuing her. Jess said her phone was broken and she didn't have the money to fix it. The ruse worked, and soon enough the offer came to put money in her bank account to pay for repairs. The receipt and CCTV footage from the bank were what the police needed to track down the stalker. But then Jess had the biggest shock of all when she met with detectives.
And they said, okay, we're going to get you to close your eyes and listen and tell us if this is the person that you've been speaking to. So I said, okay, closed my eyes. They pressed play. As soon as I heard the voice, I got goosebumps and said, that's it, that's him. And they said, okay, now open your eyes. And I opened and I said, okay, where is he? Rewind it. And they said, no, that's it. I said, no, that's a female. That's not him.
Can you tell me your full name?
Yeah, it's Lydia Abdelmalik.
And how do I spell your surname?
Abdelmalek.
The person masquerading as Lincoln Lewis, the person who convinced Jess she was in a relationship with a man, was in fact a woman.
And how old are you?
I'm 26.
26, okay. And what's your current address?
Unmasking Lydia Abdelmalik was a shock to everyone.
For so long, the person that I spoke with, in my mind, 1,000% was a man. It was a male.
I'm a Queensland detective. I've come down to Victoria. As a result of an investigation I'm completing in relation to protracted stalkings. Okay, do you understand that?
Yep. It's hard to convey how I felt at the time. I was, I wanted to vomit. To have that thing staring back at me with this voice, it just made me feel sick to my stomach. It was horrendous.
Not only horrendous, but bizarre. Lydia Abdulmalik was a 26-year-old who still lived at home with her parents. She was a respected member of Melbourne's St Mary's Coptic Orthodox Church, studied psychology, was good with IT, and saw herself as an aspiring actor.
Earlier this morning, we executed a search warrant at your family's residence. As a result of that search warrant, we took a number of computer items. So that's mobile phones, laptops, USBs.
Was there one particular thing that really struck you about this case?
Just the sheer amount of phone numbers, email addresses, fake personas, those sorts of things.
Lawyer and private investigator Tam McLaughlin specialises in fraud and deception investigations. Even he is amazed by Abdulmalik's deception.
Okay, when you get with the wrong crowd where like it's all these like popular celebrities and you just believe everybody on Facebook and stuff, that's when you get in with the wrong kind of people and you get sucked into stuff. So that's probably what's happening here. But like I said, none of our family know them.
I think she really lets her guard down because she actually gives a very good description of the offending. She talks about people being sucked into the world of celebrities. So she's essentially just described what she did to the victims without any prompting from the detective.
She's sort of claiming to be a victim, being in touch with fake Lincoln Lewis herself. I mean, it's sort of fairy tale stuff.
She has. She's already concocted a story and she has already created these backstops and perhaps even it's her own internal justification for why she's doing these things.
Why would you stalk anyone in the first place? But that's just
Tam says what's striking about Abdulmalik's police interview is that despite the mountain of evidence against her, she still tries to dupe the detectives.
You look at it from our point of view, everything just seems to be coming back to yourself.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. Like, you can only deal with what you have in front of you, but...
When you look at it like this, it's extraordinary that she kind of got away with it for so long.
5 years, that's an enormous amount of time when the first reports were actually made to police in 2011. So she probably is operating under the assumption that she's going to get away with this.
Jess's case was only the beginning of the police investigation. Detectives found other victims of Lydia Abdulmalik, including another flight attendant, one of Jess's work colleagues, who we'll call Emma. Like Jess, she received hundreds of phone calls as well as disgusting threats of violence and intimidation.
For Emma, it was so sustained and for so long that unless you're in that situation, it's very hard to understand the psychological damage that it does. And this person, it wasn't catfishing, it was psychological abuse, it was sexual abuse.
In June 2017, Abdulmalik was charged with multiple crimes. But as Jess and Emma waited for their day in court, the unthinkable happened.
One of the managers at work called me and said, I've got some bad news for you. And they said, Emma's passed away. And I said, what? And they said, she took her life. And I just hung up and I just broke down. I remembered that she had sent me a message a few nights earlier. I never got back to her. And she had reached out to me telling me that she wasn't coping. And I was too wrapped up in my own pain that I couldn't help her. And then by the time I read her message, it was too late.
Emma's death was a devastating loss to everyone who knew and loved her, but it strengthened Jess's resolve to ensure justice was served. After a drawn-out trial, Lydia Abdulmalik was found guilty of 6 counts of stalking and sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in jail.
We were elated. We were so happy. We were, in tears, crying. We'd finally stopped it because these people won't stop what they're doing. They have to be stopped. So that's what we did.
But as if there hadn't been enough suffering already, an hour after being found guilty, Lydia Abdulmalik lodged an appeal and was freed on bail.
Lydia, on what grounds are you appealing your jail term?
That level of cruelty is hard to imagine, isn't it?
Hey, how's it going? Sorry I missed your call. Just leave your name and number and I'll get back to you. Thanks.
How was that
Lincoln Lewis's same mobile phone recording.
How am I supposed to know that?
This is Australia's worst catfisher.
How do you explain that that's occurred?
And that's what I'm telling you, that I can't explain that to you.
Her name is Lydia Abdulmalik, and she subjected victims, like flight attendant Jess, to years of unimaginable hell.
So what about the 146 calls?
Again, I can't explain that to you either.
But the million-dollar question is why?
This has taken hours and hours and hours and hours of her. This is, become essentially a second job almost, So it is extremely extensive. The level of, I guess, kind of complexity of this is, something that we don't often see.
British clinical psychologist Dr. Alan Underwood works closely with Scotland Yard on stalking cases. He's convinced Abdulmalik is clearly a deeply troubled woman.
This kind of behaviour is a way perhaps of striking back at the sort of perceived unfairness and that perhaps sense of maybe entitlement that she should have these kind of things and she's unable to or unable to articulate those or control those in her life.
When you think about stalking, as misguided as it is, you sometimes think it's driven by love, not resentment or hate. But it doesn't sound like love was involved in this.
It doesn't appear to be from the notes and the information that we've seen.
The ultimate goal then is to hurt. It's actually to wound and punish her targets, her victims.
It's that sense of being able to, I guess, kind of assert autonomy, to have control, and that may be the initial motivation. And then the sustaining motivation is where you are intruding onto that person's life, so you're able to have that power and control. You're able to have that impact and to humiliate.
Why would I make those phone calls?
That's a very, very good question.
Exactly.
If Abdulmalik's aim was to control and then humiliate her victims, tragically she achieved it with Jess. So your sense of self, your sense of security, everything had been robbed from you.
Yeah. I would be walking through a terminal and I would receive a message on my phone saying, I can see you walking through the terminal, say cheese.
You guys are telling me, can you explain how that happened? How can someone do that?
What about the level of cruelty?
The level of sort of harm and the sort of the impact of that, of tricking people into thinking they're in a relationship, then threatening them, then pretending they're another person and developing that relationship to then have that kind of pulled away. Those kind of, behaviours have a real insidious kind of impact.
Former fraud investigator with the Australian Federal Police, Tam McLaughlin, agrees, but adds the difficulty in policing these crimes means offenders often believe they won't ever be caught. Do you think that the laws within Australia are strong enough for this particular type of stalking?
In this case, as we saw, the main difficulty is identifying who the actual perpetrator is. And that took years and years of diligent detective work to prove in this case.
How would you describe the attitudes of investigators, police, in regards to this crime? Do they know enough about it? Is there enough knowledge?
We all know what a blood spatter pattern looks like, or we all know what fingerprints on a stolen vehicle look like. But do we all know what the list of IP addresses that might match to a particular iPad or what the IMEI, so the hardware number that attaches to a phone is? And so it's about having the education within investigators of those particular technical aspects. You have to undertake the investigation in such a meticulous way as to make sure that you close all of the gates for someone to say, no, that wasn't me, that was someone else.
Lydia Abdulmalik appealed her original conviction for stalking, but late last year, Victorian County Court Judge Claire Quinn rejected it and increased her sentence to 4 years in prison.
Those who are prepared to engage in this kind of behaviour and allow it to progress to the extreme extent that it can, armed with the knowledge of the devastating effect it is having on the other individual, need to know that they will be punished severely.
The judge's comments couldn't have been more welcome for Jess. Her only regret was that her friend and fellow victim Emma wasn't with her to hear it. You've had so much taken away from you, but you have persisted and you have pursued, and this predator and offender is paying the consequences. Do you come away feeling strong? Feeling like you've achieved something?
On the day that it was taken to jail, I felt very strong. I felt very brave. And I felt proud because this is something that Emma and I had spoken about. We want to see this person punished for what they did and what they've taken from us.
It's a very cruel hoax, isn't it?
It is. I was heartbroken. Even to this day, I don't trust myself now. Even though I know it's not my fault, I still can't help feeling to blame for it happening, so I don't trust myself.
For Jess, it's been a decade of misery punctuated by countless moments of genuine terror. Her ordeal might be over now, but that will never lessen the fury she feels for Lydia Abdulmalik, especially knowing this wicked catfisher has never shown any remorse for her crimes.
Her family still thinks that she's innocent. You know, her community. I want them to know what kind of person they're dealing with. This person has pulled the wool over their eyes for so long. They need to know what it's capable of, and it's capable of taking lives, ruining lives. And I want people to know that when it comes out of prison. I want people to know what type of person this is.
If this story has raised issues and you need to speak with someone, call Lifeline on 13 11 14. Hello, I'm Tara Brown. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.